All right, so to wrap up the rest of this section, we're looking at non-rigid transformations. So why are they non-rigid? It's because that they change the basic shape of the graph. So rigid ones keep that general shape and just kind of move them and flip them and things like that, but non-rigid actually stretches and distorts it. So we have two types. We have a vertical stretching and shrinking of the graph. So how we do that is if we have our original function, all we're going to do is multiply the whole function by some constant. Now, depending on the size of that constant, it will cause either a stretch or a shrink vertically. So specifically, if c is greater than 1, it's going to be a vertical stretch. But if c is between 0 and 1, then it's going to shrink it. So again, just think, if you're multiplying that y value by something, it's going to stretch it out if it's large. But if it's a small value that you're multiplying it by, it's going to actually compact it. So that's what we have for that. And so now, if we get to the horizontal ones, so horizontal works a little bit differently. So now we're going to be multiplying the x value by something. So it's inside of the function itself. So that value of c is going to cause that horizontal shrink or stretch. And so now it's actually backwards though. So the horizontal stretch happens when c is between 0 and 1. And when it is greater than 1, then it's actually going to compress it horizontally. So now the textbook can be a little bit funky in how they explain it in their actual problems, but I think you should be okay based on the homework that's been assigned. So let's just analyze these three and make sure we have it down, and then that'll wrap up the section. So we have described the transformations of the function f to the function g. So looking at our function here, so we have g of x equals f of 2x plus 1. Now we should automatically know what the plus 1 does because it's at the end of the function. It causes a vertical shift, and because it's plus 1, it's going to be shifted up 1. So we know that this is going to be up 1. And then since the 2 is inside, we know that that is a horizontal distortion. So, and because it's greater than 1, we know it's a horizontal shrink. So this is going to be a horizontal shrink by 2, or by a factor of 2 is another way they say it. All right. Now, what about this one here? So we have that plus 1 at the end again, which we know is a up 1. And so now we had two things going on. So we have this 2 on the outside, and we have the 1/2 on the inside. So we know that if it's on the outside, it's going to be a vertical distortion. So this is going to be a vertical stretch by 2, or by a factor of 2. And then the 1/2 is going to be a horizontal stretch by, now we don't want to say by a half because that doesn't really make sense. So this one was a shrink by 2 because of the way it's written. But because we have the 1/2, it is a stretch, so we almost have to think of it as a horizontal stretch by a factor of 2 as well. So that's why it gets a little bit funky in the way you can word it. So, but just keep in mind, that it's distorting it horizontally. That's the big thing. And you can plot some points if you wanted to, if you had like a specific example, just to kind of see that change. Even if it's just something simple, you could do that. And then we have our last one. So what do you think for that? A half is in front, so that's going to be a vertical distortion. And we have the -2 on the inside, so let's take care of that first. So we know that that's going to shift it which way? Because it's a -2 and it's on the inside, we know it's a horizontal shift and it's to the right. So right 2, and then this is going to be a vertical shrink by, and again, because it's a fraction and we want it, and we're using it in this way, we would say a vertical shrink by a factor of 2. So we could have included that everywhere in here, obviously. So again, those non-rigid ones can be a little bit tricky, especially when it's a fractional modification. So just keep that in mind. But I wouldn't get too nervous about it if it's still a little confusing. But feel free to ask questions. Okay, and that wraps up this section. So stay tuned for the next video on 1.8. See you soon.